And something else that I'm now getting to accept is there's no wrong answer. It's just a direction.
That's
And
right.
in either direction that I go, I'll be able to fulfill those things that are part of my purpose.
Part of what's so great about you, you're like the perfect person to do this kind of job hunt coaching session with because you understand what you're worth in the market. You know how good you are. You know the options that you can create. And where there's a level of anxiety, the anxiety isn't about your ability to perform, right? It's about finding where am I going to be valued? Where am I going to be appreciated at this new level that I've achieved over the last 25 years? I got to make sure that I'm making the right call for who I am today. Hi, I'm Jenny Clark, a conscious leadership expert who spent 2 decades in executive recruiting and talent management. Having worked with giants like Google, Spencer Stewart, I discovered that the secret to transformative leadership lies in the 5 dimensions of conscious leadership. And I'm here to help you unlock your full potential. Join me on this channel as we embark on an honest and vulnerable journey together and become the kind of leader that genuinely inspires organizational transformation. John, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's good to see you.
And same
So,
here.
this is new for us to
Okay.
be recording a coaching session. You and I have had the pleasure of speaking once before,
Right.
um, but for purposes of letting people get more comfortable and aware of where you are, what you've done, would you share a little bit about your background? It's a very impressive career that you've had over the last, I think, 25 years. So
Yes.
give us a little bit of background and then tell us where you are and what you think is coming next.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I'm excited about it. But from a background standpoint, believe it or not, I started out after college with an economics major, going into supply chain. I think the buzzword was just becoming upon everybody, supply chain, when I got afforded the opportunity to go into a leadership role with Ford Motor Company straight out of college, inside of a plant, manufacturing, where I was like, I don't even like cars like that, right? But it was a great opportunity. Leading, if you could think about being 24 years old and you're going into a leadership role where there's a microcosm of the real world. So, uh, building teams, developing teams to make a car, right?
Yeah,
Going through
wow.
that whole automobile process or assembly process. I got a chance to really focus in at Ford Motor Company on what does it mean to build teams? What does it mean to develop those that you're working with? But most importantly, like what does it mean to be a leader,
Yeah.
right? A servant leader at that.
Mhm.
So worked at Ford, had several matriculating roles in the manufacturing operations and assembly plant. So if you can remember cars like the Lincoln Town Car or the F-150 truck, my teams and I, we were all responsible to some degree for the assemblies of that. Left Ford probably when auto industry started to go through its turbulent times and had a chance to say, okay, well, what industries are doing very well? And at that time, oil and gas was doing well, and I was able to take my supply chain, manufacturing, and leadership and continuous improvement expertise to oil and gas with a company called Halliburton.
Mhm.
Where there I was a production group manager, really more so building research and development type tools that they're used to drill gas, find gas and oil in the ground. Amazing opportunity. Because it wasn't like, oh, you put a stick in the ground and oil comes up, right? So I really got a chance to learn, but more so just take those expertise that I had gained at Ford and then apply that to Halliburton. So really a short period of time
Yeah.
at Halliburton before I got recruited to another major brand with Coca-Cola in manufacturing. So another promotional opportunity. Moved from Houston, Texas, back to the Midwest, and was in a plant where we were produced uh, pop if you're in the Midwest, soda if you're in the South or East Coast. Great opportunity there, leading teams, larger teams. So every time I went to another company, my role matriculated, more responsibility, more people responsibility
Yeah.
there. So worked for Coke in a couple of different roles, continuous improvement leaders, operation manager and production manager. Kind of got tapped on the shoulder again after about 6.5 years to continue in the food and beverage industry, but now have more of a widespread net of responsibility when I went to Domino's Pizza and in the supply chain. So I have responsibility for manufacturing, warehouse, and distribution for a couple different areas, starting out in Florida, going into Dallas, and then most recently Houston, Texas. So took all of that broad leadership experience in supply chain, where now it's the big buzzword,
Sure
right?
is.
Supply chain, and been able to have a pretty successful and exciting career. Considering somebody who said, "I don't even like cars like that," right? Here I am now.
You like pizza,
I love
right?
pizza.
And how did you, under what circumstances did you leave Domino's?
Yep. So we had a leadership restructure, or they had a leadership restructure and reorganization. So that afforded me the opportunity to now continue to search for that next right fit and take all of the skills that I've learned at Domino's and apply that to the next opportunity. So it's
Well,
pretty exciting.
good. But be honest. I mean, what were the early days like? Because I've
Yeah.
heard from
So
people it can be
so
kind of hard.
Yeah, so month two, right? This is month two. I'll say the first week was just honestly a chance to sleep, like literally not have to worry about what email you needed to respond to that day, not have to look at what text is coming through of some fire that you have to put out. But there was still anxiety because it was like, wow, okay, I'm actually not working, right? I'm actually um, have to now go and look for a opportunity. Part of the anxiety is also because I felt like my background and expertise would quickly, result in an opportunity. I had been talking to some other organizations
Mhm.
who were interested, and so we thought that was going to kind of develop pretty quick. But other organizations are going through their restructuring. It's kind of like, hold on, we got something for you, but it's going to take time. But in the meantime, I'm doing my due diligence. But that's where the anxiety those first couple of weeks is like, am I supposed to take a nap in the middle of the day? Is it okay? Or am I supposed to get up still at my same time? So you had that anxiety of, well, what's next? Right? So you start to question yourself. I think I've learned talking to mentors and others that that's normal.
Mhm.
You start to question like, what direction do I want to go in now? There's
Yeah.
different avenues I can
You have
go in.
choices.
You have choices,
Yeah.
but then you've also gained expertise in a certain level. So then it's like, okay, well, how does next look like? And so there's still some anxiety, there,
Sure.
honestly.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I heard you say, and I've seen your resume before, but I have it here in front of me just as a point of reference. Um, but a couple of the moves that you made, you said I was tapped on the shoulder, right? Somebody
Right.
came after me.
That's right.
And that I think is, it can be a bit of a trap for people when that's happened frequently in their career because they've been successful. You don't, you tend to, you were kind of hoping that that next thing would line up. I'm really good and people want me.
Right.
The timing is odd. We're
That's
in a strange economy. And oh, by the way, the higher up you go, remember, the fewer opportunities there are going to be that are suitable for you.
right. Right.
So, I have to harken back to the book that I wrote in 2011 called Career Mapping, Charting Your Course in the New World of Work, where that was really my thesis. That's why I wrote it, because as an executive recruiter, so many people would come to me and be like, I just lost my job, or you're going to help me find my next thing, right? And I'm going to be like, maybe not. There's a good chance I'm not, because I'm one recruiter that works for one company that sees one set of opportunities, and there are literally infinite opportunities out there.
That's right.
So you can't just invest in, remember, recruiters don't work for you, they work for the employer.
Right.
So you need to the extent you need to build a network of not just recruiters, and I'm sure you have a vast network of people who have supported your growth and development at these name brand companies over the last 25 years.
Right.
So to me, that's a better network to leverage than just applying. Tell me, be honest, have you applied for anything online that you just saw and applied to?
Absolutely, I have. And that's part, I think, the anxiety where it's like, okay, at some point we need to be back in the game. But you spoke of something, networking, and so that has currently been my strategy. Yes, I do have, and been blessed enough to have a pretty diverse network. And so what I've been doing is tapping in. I've kind of created thus far, I call it my hit list
Yeah,
of organizations and
yeah.
companies. Like there's about 10 to 12 that, I'm saying, hey, here's where great opportunities could lie. And
Mhm.
I've gotten where now I want to learn more about that culture, learn more about opportunities. So I've just gone and said, well, who do I know firsthand? Something that's been really helpful for me is even my network has now sent me connections via LinkedIn, like, hey, do you know person A at this company? Well,
Mhm.
I kind of know them, but I want to link you with them. I'll do a meeting invite, and maybe you can have like a coffee talk or exploratory conversations with them. I've really been using that right now to kind of learn about these other organizations. And so I've kind of put my pin in that approach so far.
I think that's really important. Um, because I think just applying to stuff online, even though it sounds good and it sounds like it's the exact right role that you'd fit into,
Hmm.
it's a crapshoot. And
Right,
unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of roles that end up online that have either been filled, they're old, right? Or they're actually not hiring.
right,
And that's unfortunate that employers aren't monitoring that. But to me, the more important thing is that you are strategically identifying. I call it a target list. You call it your hit list. Same
right,
thing, right? It's exactly what I would do as an executive recruiter when I was trying to find people for a role. We'd have a target list of companies that we wanted to look at, and then people in certain roles in those companies that we thought would be a match for our client. So it's this exact same thing for you. You need to figure out which companies might I want to work for. And to me, fewer is better than a lot.
right,
Maybe you start with a list of 20 companies and maybe you triangulate against who you already know, and you're saying you do know some people in some of these organizations who can activate some possible opportunities, or at least conversations.
right.
That to me is a much better way. Unfortunately, the average search takes 6 months.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
It feels like a really long time. It's always been that way. As an executive recruiter, it's all these years. It's our searches on the inside would take 6 months. And
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from everything I read, for you, it's the same. The
Yeah.
number doesn't change.
Yeah.
Different kinds of activities, but
Right.
it's still, yeah, that's how
It's
long it
still the
takes.
same.
six
And
months.
and I think you mentioned something that's important that I had to realize is the higher that you go up, sometimes the longer that time frame is,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So even when I remember, you want to call it, tapped on the shoulder or to go to pursue other opportunities with new companies, it still was a 4 to 6 month approach, as in having conversations, then you're getting into the interviews, then you're going through the interview process from the offer to kind of going with the negotiation there. It was easily a 4 to 6 month approach, or 4 to 6 month time spent.
Yeah. That's what you got to expect. And I can imagine it's still anxiety producing, right? Because you don't know. And even after you have the offer, they might not want you to start for another several weeks. You might not want to start for another several
Right,
weeks.
right.
Um, but let's talk about getting you ready for some of these conversations
Okay.
and making sure that you're presenting yourself in the best possible light. I actually think you did a nice job of just just here giving me an overview of some of the things that you worked on. And what I liked is that you actually specified some of the leadership behaviors and competencies that you were developing as you were moving and up these organizations. And you were able to point to, you were in several at Ford's, you had four different progressive. roles, right? You weren't
Right.
hopping around, and I think you, and if I remember Ford correctly, in those days, these were intentional sort of what development opportunities that they
That's
would
right.
be presenting you with,
That's right. Kind of
presuming
almost go
you
through it a
did well in
training.
the early one, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So one of the things that I feel like I appreciate the compliment, but I still need to get more comfortable in the storytelling of my
Yes.
story.
Yes.
So I'm trying to use that approach of storytelling. So this was kind of a good practice, and I can go back and tweak and maybe even almost like how you have to write a script as you're preparing for your show. It's writing a script for my career, and what is the story in each role in each organization that I want to when I want to share to them. So I need to tweak that some more.
Yeah. Oh, and we can spend a little bit of time doing that today because I think that's helpful for so many people who just kind of go, here's my resume, and I can tell you, I have literally said to people, yeah, I read it, but I want you to tell me what I
Right,
should actually know,
right,
right? And having a sort of master script is something that I think is brilliant, or at least the master resume, if you want to link it. But then it's everything. I'm looking to hear what's not on the resume. That's what I want you to be able to tell me, right? And where did you mess up? Where didn't you do as well as you had expected? And importantly, what did you learn?
right. Okay.
What did you learn, and how did you develop that learning into a bona fide competency? Because I did hear you specify in the earlier part of this conversation, I heard the term leadership 2 or 3 times, which is great. Early on, you were exposed to these companies had leadership development programs that they were putting you through. You were
Right.
being groomed at an early age. So you understand that, and being able to talk about the progression of how you became a better leader becomes really important in different environments, in different geographies, right? Different cultures,
Yep.
both community cultures and corporate
Well,
cultures.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to practice? How might you want to approach developing this
Yeah.
narrative?
Let's practice a little bit. Obviously, I'm taking and jotting some notes down as well, and kind of just going back into my head so that I can have those specific examples. So, like, yeah, let's practice a little bit if you want me to kind of
You know what
start
I
off.
what
Sure.
might be interesting is to start with your first one, your first, what was that, 9 years at Ford. And we don't need to do a super deep dive, but I think if you could summarize what some of the key learnings were then, and then bring us forward to the how many years at Domino's? 5?
Uh, Almost eight, 7.5.
Oh, okay, I missed the other. Yep. Okay. You got there in 2016.
Yep.
Okay. Um, so I think the beginning, early days, what were you learning? It was a structured program, and then bring it forward to the more recent role. How did you grow and develop? What was happening in some of these organizations, market dynamics that might have shifted such
Hmm.
that you were challenged or you didn't do so well? We love hearing about that too, because that can show a level of self-awareness. So those are some of the tips that I'll give you, and I'll prompt you along the way.
Okay. Okay. So we'll start. Well, I started my career, believe it or not, almost 25 years ago in manufacturing. It was when the word supply chain was becoming this big buzzword, and I was afforded the opportunity right out of college to go into a leadership role inside of a plant with Ford Motor Company. So this means we
Mhm.
were making cars. If you can think about assembly plant, 3 to 4 thousand people. It's a microcosm of the world. Um, all different cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities, and somebody giving you a two-way radio with a million square feet plant and saying, "Here you go." And at Ford, what I really did learn early on is this word that we hear now, leadership. Like,
Mhm.
what is leadership? What is servant leadership? I came into Ford, and one of the first things, if you think about a blue collar workforce, that I had to learn is uh, develop relationships with your people. It's about the people. A manager told me early on, he says, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So I
Mm,
took that at my time at Ford Motor Company to really build teams that showed, like, yes, we have a role to build this car, but more importantly, how are we going to do that as a team? How are we going to listen to each other? I learned how to lead with vulnerability because there were times I just did not like the job if a 23, 24-year-old, right? But I also learned how to find the person that you can trust with that quote unquote works for you,
mm-hmm.
but you're really working for them. So that's something else
Servant
through that
leadership.
that period of time and career at Ford is you are working for those who are doing the actual work, the front line individuals that are building the car. My job was to remove obstacles so that we can be successful. So I took that approach to.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second because I
Okay.
want to know, it triggered for me. We started in at the work thing. I don't know anything about kind of where you went to school and how I'm not looking for a whole trajectory as much
Mhm.
as what were you coming into the workforce? What had you been exposed to in your upbringing? What had your parents maybe exposed you
Yeah.
to in terms of what it meant to work? Your college, if you were fraternity, whatever, what were your influences and how
Yeah.
were your
So
expectations met or not?
yeah. So great question. Starting at Ford at 23, 24 years old, my influences were my parents, right? My mother and father back home in the city of Detroit because I did go to college at Florida A&M. So coming back home, auto industry is where a lot of people go to in Detroit. But my parents were they were service leaders. Mother was an educator, retired as assistant superintendent in Detroit Public Schools. Father was a Detroit city councilman, a pastor. So it was all about
Yeah.
serving. And so I learned that servant leadership and then even having different opportunities in college to serve on, different organizational uh, committees. So I always knew I was going to be in a leadership role. I just didn't know it was going to come so fast right out of college,
Mhm.
in a plant in such a dynamic environment. Um, but even to this day, as I progress my career forward, I really realize and know that some of it is part of my purpose and calling. This is
Mhm.
one of the things that I had to learn. And all of these different roles, I ended up going into the marketplace in supply chain and manufacturing. But it's been how do you serve people,
Yeah.
right? For me, even into my very last role at Domino's, it was like, how do I develop people and help them pull out their natural gifts, strengths, and talents?
Mhm.
And so, even though we're trying to get a product, whether it's a car down the line, whether it's soda or pop or oil or gas to be manufactured and processed and produced, or pizza, it's really more about the people. And so I feel like that's part of my purpose and calling, but that's the way that I've entered the marketplace, if you so to speak. So that gives
Now,
you a little bit of background.
I love that. That's really good. And I want to kind of maybe jump to what you're looking for and make sure that you are leveraging some of your past as you talk about that. You're offering a rationale for wanting to do these things either because you've done something similar before or because you haven't,
Hmm.
but you see the through line between the work that you have done throughout your 25 years that you can pull into this new thing that is beginning to sound attractive. So
Right.
let's practice on that one because it's a little bit more of a liftoff from the more recent work, harkening all the way back in some cases to the early days. But now that we're grounded in knowing you came up in a great situation with brand name companies, great development opportunities, a solid basis in your home life, right? You had great role models to demonstrate what good leadership looks like. So now, what kinds of roles might you be thinking? of targeting which sectors, because functionally you may or may not want to stay in operations supply chain. So talk about where you think you might be wanting to look.
Yeah.
What's on that target list?
So
That
Jenny, this is part of where some of the anxiety goes in. I even before our conversation today, I was doing a little preparing, and it's a crossroads. It's a moment of being at a crossroads because it's one here is 20 plus years, 25 years of expertise and experience, and then I've been able to fulfill my purpose and passion in different roles.
Mhm.
But the other point is, or the other part of the role is it going to look the same? Should it even look the same? For me, I love connecting people. I love, I have a consulting business that um, I'm trying to launch. I won't say try, I'm launching or relaunching called People's to People Consulting, which is really about having a marketplace of subject matter experts for individuals that are trying to build their business or establish organizations and companies and entrepreneurs. So I can tap into my network and connect those two entities together and kind of consult them through a project or consult them through a startup. So I'm at that crossroads of, well, how do I even get to this point when I've had all of this expertise here? And then secondly, where I am in life now, it's not like 20 years ago where you can take these risky jumps
Mhm.
because you still have to live and survive and you want a certain lifestyle. So it's a funny point or place for me right now to be
Mhm.
honest.
Mhm.
Part of me is pulling me where again I have the background and can go in a certain direction and then others like, but this is kind of what I'm passionate about. Or do I find a role that someone would say, hey, we see not only his passion, but we see his skill set and being able to collaborate, build teams, connect people,
Lead.
lead. Yeah,
Lead.
yeah,
Because the leadership competencies, I'm going to jump ahead and say you can extract those leadership competencies and apply them to a different sector and or a different function. There are plenty of adjacent functional areas that where you could leverage that same. It doesn't have to be supply chain.
right,
It could be operations in a completely different organization. It could be in a technology company. It could be in a, who know, you're in food and beverage. There arguably there's some similarities around, you're still producing something,
right,
right?
right,
So, and yet you're talking about creating the possibility of creating a services organization for yourself with a couple of colleagues or former colleagues.
that's right.
So, and my take on that is parallel path, parallel path them. It doesn't, right now, you don't necessarily have to commit. Now, there's a trade-off, right? Because there are only so many hours in a day. So you got to decide, and it's going to, week by week, it's probably going to vary, but how do you want to um, allocate your time to this possible consulting business? And how do you want to continue to create? I believe you are creating opportunities for yourself by doing the outreach, executing against that target list that you have, having meetings with people, eventually having interviews with people, doing research to prepare for those interviews and to reassess your list. You know, sort of every few weeks, you need to go back and check. So you're parallel pathing, and at some point, you're going to have to make a call.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't know enough yet.
that's right. That's right.
Um, and but you might get to a point where certain opportunities look so compelling, you're going to have to walk away from the consulting business or vice versa.
Right, right.
And
So
don't, and keep in mind that the contacts that you're making, the networking that you're doing, you don't hear that word that often anymore. I think it's undervalued.
mhm,
You don't know how these contacts are going to play out. if they're going to lead you to a regular gig like you're used to, a leadership role, or supporting this consulting business that you're exploring.
Right. So that's where it's for me. It's keeping an open mind. So I had to kind of almost release. I don't want to say all of the past, but release of how I identify myself as in terms of a career, and say maybe this is God sent. No, not maybe. It is a God sent time to really recreate the direction I want to go in, or even more so where that purpose lies. And something else that I'm now getting to accept is there's no wrong answer. It's just a direction,
That's
and
right.
in either direction that I go, I'll be able to just to fulfill those things that are part of my purpose.
Part of what's so great about you, and we should probably wrap up kind of on this note. I wish we had so much more time. You're like the perfect person to do this kind of job hunt coaching session with, because you understand what you're worth in the market. You know how good you are. You know the options that you can create. And where there's a level of anxiety, the anxiety isn't about your ability to perform, right? It's about finding, where am I going to be valued? Where am I going to be appreciated at this new level that I've achieved over the last 25 years? I got to make sure that I'm making the right call for who I am today. Is that a
Right.
fair summary?
That's fair. It's trying to be intentional, right?
That's the
And
word.
and even purpose, uh, driven within this search.
Yeah. Well, I know, I know for a fact that you're going to find something. It might take several months, but the fact that you are so grounded so far, to the extent that you are, that you have this hit list, that you're exploring things outside of what you've done historically. You have courage, you have clarity, you have intentionality, and I'm here to help. Just know that.
I appreciate that. No, you have been inspiring. I think I've told you this before. Be able to go click on, YouTube or Instagram, and get those snippets, and then be a part of the conscious leadership community. It's something I now have the time, so to speak, and I look forward to getting on the monthly calls and getting opportunities like this. So I ask that you continue to do what you're doing. This is, I think, part of your purpose, and I see a lot of what you're doing in me, or where this could lead down to at some point. Um, but so I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. That fills my heart. That's why I do what I do, because I want to see talented people like you end up in the right place so that you can be of service to others. That's what we need right now. So, John, thank you so much for being
Thank you. I
a guest
appreciate you.
on this.
Yes.
Appreciate you. We're going to keep track of you too. Know that.
Thank you.
All right. Take
See you
care.
then. Bye bye.